Hello, welcome to Tom Myers versus the rest of the world. A lot's
Yay.
happened since last week. Jim Jordan has been denied Speaker of the House for yet another round. It's hard to know who's yelled no at Jim Jordan more, House Republicans or his wrestling students. God. The only way Jim Jordan will get the Speaker's gavel will be if he gets one off of Etsy. In fact, if Jim Jordan tried to win a Speaker's gavel from one of those claw machines, the claw inside the machine would transform itself and give Jim Jordan the middle finger. Jim Jordan is basically the comic who keeps showing up at the New York City Club despite not having met his bringer requirement. That's for the back of the room. And all my Spotify listeners, basically. The fact that Republicans have trouble choosing one of their own to be Speaker of the House indicates one thing. They're finally in touch with American voters. First, it was Kevin McCarthy, then Steve Scalise, now Jim Jordan. All these House Republicans are basically like bratty kids, and the position of Speaker is like a child's toy where they yell, "No, I want to keep playing with it." The campaign for the position of Speaker has gone from Kevin McCarthy to Steve Scalise to Jim Jordan to Tom Emmer. Now that he's dropped out, it'll probably go to Byron Donalds, Matt Gaetz. It's basically like playing hot potato, except when the music stops, the potato explodes to reveal that it is filled with loose fecal matter. In which case, even the most hardliner Trump Republicans will hope that the winner is Liz Cheney. Three of Donald Trump's attorneys, Sidney Powell, Kenneth Chesebro, and Jenna Ellis, pled guilty in the Georgia 2020 election interference case. It's fitting to know that they showed the same loyalty to Trump that Trump showed when he said he would join his supporters at the Capitol. After Sidney Powell's plea deal was set, Chesebro was set to be the only defendant to go to trial in Atlanta this week before he decided to plead out. In addition to Trump, no one is more disappointed about this than the tabloid papers who just missed out on the headline, "The cheese stands alone." That's the cleanest joke you're going to hear all season, so if you didn't like that, tough shit. It's difficult to comprehend how these lawyers could just go ahead and behave in such a way that not only jeopardized the law, but also the country. My theory is that they wanted to behave so badly that when they died, they could end up in hell for the sole purpose of beating the shit out of Charles Manson.
Yeah.
And on that note, on with the show. Please join me in welcoming Jeff Hysen, Gina Brown, and Chipp Jones.
Hey,
Tom.
Everyone, welcome. What's been going on with you guys this week?
Well, it's fascinating watching this continuing saga of the Republicans' search for a speaker, given that no one wants the job and no one believes in government. This one, the latest one, Emmer, dropped out on Tuesday. He didn't even get up to a vote. And what's hysterical is how they're blaming the Democrats for being unified. Do you think that any of them would have helped Nancy Pelosi if she was in a speaker fight? Of course not. They would have pushed her down the stairs.
Right. In an amazing fashion, Trump comes out of court and he's like, Emmer probably dropped out because I didn't endorse him. His unendorsement. He thinks it was because of his unendorsement.
people are waiting to see where he was going. I like the talking point the Republicans seem to be holding to is when asked, is your party, falling apart with 8 members starting this whole thing? Their chant now is, oh, well, it was only 8 of our members, but it was 208 of the Democrats that voted with them. So always remember, it's 208 of the Democrats that caused this.
Right.
Really? Well, you know what? Jeffries has been getting 210 votes each vote, so it only takes 7 Republicans to end this. If they were really caring about getting business going, only 7 of them would have to change side.
As I said 2 weeks ago, and I'm surprised that they weren't listening. The Republican caucus wasn't listening to Tom Myers versus the rest of the world. I told them right here. I said, all one of those 7 or 5 or whatever number it is needs to go over to Jeffries and say, we will drop any of the impeachment stuff. We will drop the Hunter Biden stuff. We will keep the government going. We'll pass a continuing resolution. Just vote for one of the 5 of us.
I think the only issue is that Republicans are listening to this podcast, just unfortunately not the ones who are willing to do that.
Right. Right.
The war between Israel and Hamas is not a new phenomenon, despite all the times we as Americans have tried to push it out of our consciousness. The only things we know for sure, Israel certainly has the right to exist, and the bulk of the Palestinian populace are not in favor of Hamas. In fact, Hamas did not even have the support of most of the people of the Palestinian regions. In fact, Hamas has even gone so far as to suspend elections there, thus creating a growing resentment among the people of the governing body is supposed to help. The unrest in the religious capital of the world, and indeed of 3 of the world's major religions, has been going on for years, even before the existence of Israel. But what is the solution? Is it a 2-state solution? And if so, what are the ramifications? Do we as the West get involved? Historically speaking, the result of the West setting political boundaries for that part of the world is, at best, mixed. So what do? Have Israel go back to its pre-1967 borders? Or do we isolate ourselves from the problem, stop getting involved in foreign matters, and do we let things sort themselves out on their own and hope the quote-unquote good guys win? Joining us to discuss this in greater detail than I can envisage, please welcome back to the show, retired educator, therapist, and human rights activist, Lucy Strausbaugh.
Hello.
Hey.
Hi. Hello.
Lucy, welcome back to the show.
Good to be here.
Did I sum that up?
Yes, you
Did I
did.
sum that up well, or did I miss anything? Was I off base on anything?
Not off base at all. But before I speak to this situation, I would like to put myself in a context so people understand where I'm coming from. As a religious educator in an all-girls Catholic school for 41 years, I taught a morality course where the centerpiece was teaching the Holocaust and all of the moral ramifications of that horrible genocide. And once the 90s hit, I started paying more attention to other genocides because one was happening in the former Yugoslavia, Bosnia, Croatia, and Serbia. And so I want people to know that I firmly, stand with Jewish people in all of that. But because of my human rights orientation and the fact that I've been a lifelong pacifist, I can't ignore what's happening to the Palestinians either. So that's really where I'm coming from on this issue.
And have you had some experience in dealing with authoritarian regimes or dictatorships?
Minimally, but I've been close enough to find it abhorrent. My daughter, who I adopted from Romania, had the horrible experience of being put in one of their concentration camp-like orphanages. And the dictator, Ceausescu, 45 years of horrific rule, dictatorial rule, and control. One of the commonalities between what I know of in communist era Romania was a control tactic that the Israelis have used in the last 15 years, that of controlling the heat, the electricity, the water, all of the functions necessary for life. That was done under the authoritarian communist regime of Ceausescu. And other than that, I have been on delegations during wartime to both Nicaragua and El Salvador, and had the experience in San Salvador of sitting in the police station, trying to get passage through permits to go through militarized areas, but knowing that those very people I was dealing with had blood all over their hands from killing, the rampant killings of the Salvadoran people, the peasants. So I've been close enough. Yeah.
So you've ridden on the bullet-riddled boats in Nicaragua, I assume.
How did you know?
My My wife was with the Institute of Policy Studies, and so she spent a lot of time down there.
Wonderful. And I
so,
was with Witness for Peace.
Yeah.
And I can't begin to imagine either side living through what they're living through right now in the so-called Holy Land.
Mhm.
You know, as a former religion teacher, it pains me to say what I'm going to say, but the vast majority of the worst things that have ever happened on our planet have been the result of religious wars and religious hatreds. So I hope you guys, being comedians, I really hope you have a more positive take on possibilities than I do, because I will tell you, my initial reaction to the Hamas attack was just total hopelessness for the entire situation. And I saw somewhere in the wilds of the internet this quote that I am sure, it was not accredited to anyone, but I am sure it comes from the deep, deep well of Jewish suffering. It's going to get worse before it gets worse. And I think that's what we see coming. I really do.
It's interesting because I don't think this conflict actually didn't start out of any kind of religious issue. It actually started out of anti-Semitism. I mean, this whole fiasco in Israel started with the fact that Europe, especially Britain and America, didn't want a flood of Jews to their country. And interestingly enough, I've been tied to this since I was a kid. My grandfather's best friend was Ralph Bunche, who was taken from the U.S. State Department by the UN to actually create the Jewish state. He won a Nobel Peace Prize in 1950 for his work in the Arab-Israeli conflict, and basically it was set up to keep the Jews from going into Europe and into the United States.
That's interesting. I got a Ralph Bunche scholarship from high school into college.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah, I can remember as a kid, like when I was about 7, sitting on his knee, because we lived in New York, but my grandfather was ambassador to the United States from Haiti, and he lived in Washington. I remember us coming down and having dinner with Ralph Bunche, and at my granddad's place, and actually sitting up on his knee.
Well, that's awesome. That is awesome.
But a lot of this stuff.
When I refer to religion being at the core of it, clearly this particular attack doesn't have religious overtones. But what makes me feel hopeless is knowing that on the extremes of both sides, you have zealot fundamentalists, and they're militant, and they're impossible to talk to discuss, because if God's telling them to do something, that trumps everything. Mm-hmm. And, I go back to how I felt in the 90s. I think this was 95 when Yitzhak Rabin was assassinated by a right-wing Israeli. That he was the closest that the negotiations ever got with the Palestinians to create some kind of a solution. And since his killing, there hasn't really been a solution on the table, because the extreme ends simply are not going to allow it.
This one phrase you just used, Lucy, and I don't think you used this in this context, but you use the word both sides. And to me, that's a problem. Not the way you used it, but people are saying both sides are wrong. I want to be clear about this, and I think it's a fundamental starting point for this discussion is that Israel was attacked. Mm-hmm. Israel was attacked by a group of terrorists who crossed the border and killed 1,400 Israelis, some of them children, some of them teenagers at a music festival. Mm-hmm. They decapitated children. They have over 200 hostages there. That's Hamas. Hamas said that they want to eradicate all Jews. That's where we started. If you want to talk about, not you particularly, if other people want to talk about Israel's response and whether or not it's done too much, whether or not Israel's gone too far, whether or not Israel has used this as an excuse to detract from the terrible administration of the that they have with under Netanyahu. Israel has the right to protect itself. You can question what Israel has done, but Israel was attacked here, and all throughout America, we are hearing yes, but Israel provoked it by the way it has treated the Palestinians. I'm in favor of a two-state solution. I imagine many of the 1,400 dead are in favor of a two-state solution. I hate Netanyahu. I've resisted the opportunity to go to Israel, and I've never been. I'm of the Jewish faith, and I've never been to Israel, and I've been invited to go, and recently, and I would not go under Netanyahu. And I feel badly that I've never been there. But the point here is Israel has a right to exist, and they killed 1,400 people. So throughout America, people are saying, well, yes, but, and Israel is wrong. And so many, quote unquote, left organizations are leaving Jewish people behind. And that's what hurts me. That's what hurts so many people in America here. And fortunately, President Biden has spoken out about this.
But Jeff, how do you square the circle? I mean, you can talk about what Hamas has done now, but in 2008, Israel bombed Gaza. They killed 2,000 people. 313 of those were children. So it's like there is a yes, there is a but at the end of it.
No, there isn't. That doesn't justify this action. You can question what Israel, you can decry what Israel has done, because Netanyahu is not in favor of a peaceful two-state solution.
Right.
And neither, by the way, are many Palestinians. Lucy may know better, but Hamas isn't. So there are problems on both ends.
Exactly, and that's what I'm saying. I mean, when you say that they attacked and they killed 1,400 people, it's like you don't acknowledge the fact that Israel has killed thousands of people as well.
I do, but I'm not. Are you justifying this?
I am not. I am not. But what I'm saying is that we can't go so far over that we have a senator, Lindsey Graham, who comes on and says, well, we should just level the place, just bomb and flatten Gaza. It's like, wait a minute. You know, that's going too far, you know?
And there are people who believe that, and you can question Israel's response, but you cannot, to me, this began on that terrible Saturday during Sukkot, when many Jews were in temple, when many Jews were praying. That's where it began. And if you want to push it back for ancient history, and I'm not saying that, I'm not disagreeing with anything you said, Tom, but this battle began that day.
This particular instance, I agree with you, began that day. I do think we can't ignore the occupation that has been living there. We can't ignore it, and it does not justify it. But two things can be correct, and two things can also be wrong. So I agree with you. It from this very specific one on the 7th, or what I think it was the 7th, that was wrong. There's just no way of thinking it came from completely nowhere when there's just a built-up frustration of apartheid. It came from somewhere.
But that doesn't justify what they did.
I agree.
None of this is justified. None of it's justified. You can't take history out of this, though.
Yeah.
You can't take history. I mean, you can't take everything that Benjamin Netanyahu has done. I mean, this guy, Netanyahu, was a special forces guy. I mean, the way he came to prominence was during a Palestinian terrorist takeover, a hijacking of a plane, where he was part of the special ops that went on and killed the hijackers. He was wounded, shot in the arm, and that's what made him a hero. And he has been pushed right. I mean, you know, in was it 93 or something like that? He attempted to give back some of the occupied territory, and he was voted out of office. So that's why he came back 10 years later, and it's become as far right as you can get. You know, he's learned that he cannot give anything thing to the Palestinians, or he loses his political power.
But-
And so
right.
it's created this situation where it's untenable on both sides.
Yes. And
And
he is the one who has created the environment that it allowed the unspeakable to happen. I mean, I haven't seen or heard anyone who I guess there's people out there who are justifying what Hamas did, but to me, that is obscene. There's no way to.
But you just said Netanyahu created the environment. He's awful. He's what Trump aspires to be like.
Yes,
Right?
yes.
So let's make that clear. But they bombed. They went into Israel and slaughtered people.
Correct. There's no
Right.
justification.
There is not, and what Gina said. Let's go back to a phrase Gina used. Two things can be true at the same time, but so many people, especially people on the left, who I usually agree with, who I've sided with, have abandoned Israel because of this history. And they're saying Israel deserves this. And you saw this on campuses throughout America. You see this by some politicians as well, and it's disgusting to me, and it makes me wonder who the allies of the Jews are.
Yeah, I think it's overblown about people saying they deserve it. I think people say that it makes sense, because the other thing that goes on here is this thing that happened on October 7th is horrible, and it's compact into a single event over a couple of days. But there have been Palestinians that have been dying in occupied territory from lack of food, medicine, and stuff, day in and day out for 10, 12, 15 years. But we don't talk about that. In fact, the Western media doesn't even really cover that.
Okay, but what you're doing there is almost justifying the reaction. I don't think you mean to do that, but that sounds where you're leading.
Well, what I'm saying is that we've got to get to a point where we say everyone is guilty on both sides and everyone needs to come to the table and make change. If you bring one person to the table who says, I am justified because of what they did on the 7th, and it's a horrible thing, but you don't acknowledge what has been going on for his history, you never get anywhere. As a Black American, I know this so well. As a Native American, they must know it as so well too, is that everything is always couched in the person who has the least amount of power and what they do at any given moment. It's like throwing a 10-year-old into the ring with Mike Tyson and they scratch and bite, and you're like, hey, they're not following the rules. You can't expect them to follow the rules,
But that doesn't mean, but again, that doesn't justify the action.
But we're not talking about justifying. We're talking about looking at everything on both sides and saying that no one has the high ground.
We're kind of.
Sorry.
I am giving Jeff the last word on that one.
Okay, I'm just saying that no one has the high ground, is what I'm saying.
We're kind of spinning our wheels here, I think.
But one thing, Chipp, as a Jewish American, don't diminish how the impact of this on us. We saw a prominent Jewish politician in Detroit was just killed. There's a question whether or not that was religiously motivated, hate motivated. I think it probably was. There's a feeling throughout America about pointing their fingers at Jewish Americans and saying that you're at fault here. Don't diminish this.
But like I said, it's a 6-year-old Palestinian boy was stabbed to death in Chicago. So I'm saying is that you can, every time you justify or try to say, well, we got to look at it this way, there is a counterweight on the other side. And that's what I'm saying is that we got to look at this holistically, or we're going to constantly keep going back and forth and back and forth.
This is the United States of America. We have perfected both sidesism, unfortunately. All you have to do is look at our cable news system.
I hate the both
that.
sides thing.
Yeah.
Let's all get our stuff off of TikTok and become like Gina and become atheists. Can we do that, please?
I'll leave Gina's stuff on TikTok so we can watch her dance.
One love.
That's right.
In this excerpt from a CNN report, we can see the difficulty in getting aid into Gaza across the Egyptian border and the frustration shown as a result.
For days, they have been waiting, More than 200 trucks full of aid desperately needed in Gaza, but stuck on the Egyptian side of the Rafah border crossing. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres hoped to be here for a much-needed diplomatic win.
As quickly as possible.
Instead, he found himself in the midst of a protest, his remarks drowned out by the crowd.
People are chanting over and over again, with our blood, with our souls, we will defend Palestine. There's a huge amount of anger, a huge amount of emotion, much of it directed at the West.
We need justice! We need justice!
And much also at Western media, who people here feel have favored Israeli voices over Palestinians.
Where is your humanity?
A protester starts shouting at me. We invite her to do an interview with us.
Okay, fine. When 1,000+ Palestinian babies die, you don't feel the same. You don't feel the same as when I tell you one of your own has died. But these are our own. And it is unfair, and Egypt will stand with Palestine. All Western channels are talking for Israel. If the United Nations is standing for Israel, if all these international institutions are standing for Israel, who's there for the Palestinians? And don't call it a war. The jargon is even more infuriating. It's not a war. They're not on equal footing. It is not a war.
For many, it is deeply personal. A Palestinian man holds up his ID.
I can't contact
You
with
can't
my
come,
family
your
there.
family's on the other side.
Yeah, I have 7 sisters and my father, my mother, grandmother, uncles. All my family is there. I can't contact with them. I don't know.
Are they okay?
I don't know if they are okay or not.
As Egyptian soldiers stand by, the demonstrators get more animated. Protests are normally illegal here, but today the Egyptian president called on people to take to the streets.
So this is rapidly becoming a very chaotic scene now. They're trying to get the Secretary General out of here.
We are ordered back onto the buses and escorted out through the crowd back to Arish Airport, where piles of aid sit by the runway, so close to where they need to be, but held back, the UN says, by complications over how to monitor the trucks that enter Gaza and how to establish a continuous humanitarian corridor.
I mean, I was making the quip earlier about how cable news seems to have perfected both sidesism and how it's and sort of how it's affected American discourse. But that particular clip, I think, shows just the power of what can happen when you have continuous news coverage, when you don't have world events boiled down to 30 minutes for 7 days a week on the three major networks, and you get to the crux of the issue, which is you have resources that need to get in, but the first they weren't getting in, and then they'll be allowed in, and then something happens, now they're not, and then they're going to be in again. And I mean, this episode is going to be out like 36 hours or something like that after we record it. Who knows what the situation is going to be then.
And that's what I fear is there have been 5,000 deaths already since the 7th, and mostly as a result of the airstrikes. But as we speak, the very last of the electricity is going to be leaving the hospitals, which they have said hundreds of babies in NICUs are going to immediately die. And there's simply no other way to phrase any of this other than genocidal. It's a genocidal effect. Whether that's the intention or not, it is the effect. And let me just mention what was kind of significant about that clip that you chose. I have CNN on all day it's muted most of the time. But when this popped up, I could tell how really angry that Palestinian woman was. So I wanted to hear what was going on. And I was so disappointed to discover Clarissa Ward faked hiding from a bomb when no bombs were dropping. They were getting footage, I guess. And that was what she was really getting yelled at for in the very beginning. So I am disturbed that they're play acting the news. Not necessary.
I guess I see. I think she was angry, but I guess they talked about the anger so much, but I don't see it as anger as much as more like they're exasperated and they feel they feel like no unloved, frankly.
Yeah.
They feel like unloved children, and no, and I think there is some truth to nobody coming to
Yeah.
their aid, because we do back Israel and Egypt, and Iran a little bit, I think, helps them to some degree or whatever, but they really are just sort of the stepchildren, if you will, and they don't have a place to call home, and so I don't see it as anger as much as it's super sad, but it's also just
Desperate. Just so
it's
desperate.
desperation. It's desperation, and that's a very different feeling. It's you're fighting for survival in that, as opposed to I'm mad at you. It's survival.
Yeah.
You can't help but watch her the woman's statements and feel empathy and feel sad at the condition there. It's impossible, no matter which side of the border you're on.
For years, the Republican Party was the party that stood by Israel and whoever was in charge, no matter who was prime minister. That, of course, changed, like most things, with Donald Trump, who feels no shame in publicly showing his disdain for Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, as we can see in these two clips. The first from his time in the Oval Office, and the other just recently on the campaign trail.
Think Sleepy Joe could have made this deal, baby? Sleepy Joe. I think, do you think he would have made this deal somehow? I don't think so.
Well, Mr. President, one thing I can tell you is we appreciate the help for peace from anyone in America, and we appreciate what you've done enormously.
Yeah.
Room, we followed the whole thing, and about 15 seconds later, it was all over, and we did it. But I'll never forget that Bibi Netanyahu let us down. That was a very terrible thing, I will say that. And so when I see sometimes the intelligence, you talk about the intelligence, or you talk about some of the things that went wrong over the last week, they've got to straighten it out, because they're fighting potentially a very big force. They're fighting potentially Iran. And when they have people saying the wrong things, everything they say is being digested by these people, because they're vicious and they're smart. And boy, are they vicious, because nobody's ever seen the kind of sight that we've seen. Nobody's ever seen it. But they cannot play games. So we were disappointed by that, very disappointed. But we did the job ourselves, and it was absolute precision, magnificent, beautiful job. And then Bibi tried to take credit for it. That wasn't good. That didn't make me feel too good, but that's all right. So they got to strengthen themselves up.
I like how in the first clip, Trump made that Sleepy Joe moniker. And then, ironically enough, in the next clip, he's the one who sounds like he's staving off death, like he's trying to put off a loan payment.
With all MAGA people, anything they say about anyone else is always projection of what and who they are. Always. You can take that.
And it could change with the wind. It's like
he sounded like his Ambien was kicking in.
It's so hard to follow, because it's like those people and they and we did a wonderful, and it's magnificent. He never really he never finishes like a thought or a sentence fully, and so I can't really ever follow.
Everyone on social media pretends to be a foreign policy expert. They do this in their spare time, it seems, when they're not too busy being doctors, economists, or celebrity marriage counselors. For years, the media has been cautioning us about the perceived dangers of a two-state solution between Israel and the Palestinians, and that has filtered down to the populace, some of whom believe such a system is too complex. In this clip, we see an exchange between Michigan Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib, the only Palestinian-American member of Congress, and one such constituent, in an exchange from 2019.
Coexist. Separate but equal doesn't work. It didn't work with blacks and whites in our country. It shouldn't work in Israel, right?
So would that be right for Israel to exist? Congresswoman, it's really concerning for me that you can't just say that you believe Israel should exist.
Let me repeat this.
So would that be a right for a Jewish state?
Oh my God, do you understand what that means?
I
To
absolutely
coexist?
do.
That means that
Would that
everyone
be
should coexist. Why isn't that beautiful? That should mean coexist. That means everyone should feel safe, no matter.
So
who
the
they
Jews
are,
would
what
have a
their
state that they
background
felt safe in?
is. If it means my grandmother can't exist equally as a human being, then no, right? So coexist. Separate but equal doesn't work.
The source of that was Fox. Fox was provided that video, and of course they titled it as Rashida Tlaib snaps at a woman in exchange from 2019, when, you know, really she's trying to say let them coexist. And then she referenced separate but equal, and like only Fox would think that's a horrific comparison.
Yeah, don't give her any dispensation. She publicly stated that Joe was wrong for defending Israel, and she said that Israel bombed that hospital when it was not Israel. That was the initial reports. The initial reports were wrong. The Times even blared it was Israel's responsibility. And yesterday they, as in smaller type, said, yeah, we messed up. But she's a congressman. She has no excuse for that. So she was exactly wrong about that. So don't give her any pats on the back for what she said years ago.
She could have been, I mean, she was right when she said that in 2019.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, Gina. That doesn't excuse what she did last week.
No, I'm not excusing it. I'm just and I think she used. I always like to say people use they make decisions based on information that they have at the time, which is how I describe all my marriages and subsequent divorces. I used the information I had at the time made sense, right? So I'm just saying, like, last week, maybe she probably, I would submit, based on some of the things that she's had to deal with since entering being Congress, that it's very emotional for her. This is emotional for a lot of people, right? But I'm just saying, like, this is coming from she's arguing for her family, just like other people are. And that, when you're fighting for your family, I guess, like I said earlier, it's survival. You're coming from such an emotional place that it's so hard to be objective.
Right.
Like, you know what I mean? It's like a parent. But
Right.
so that's all I'm saying. Please just,
In 2 days, President Biden was able to leave Washington for Israel, meet with Netanyahu and the government officials there, and return to Washington to make a nationally televised speech that evening. Despite that, there is criticism that his age and the fact that he has physically stumbled is a sign that he is not up for the job. One of those critiques comes from Alabama Senator Tommy Tuberville, who has been coaching football for so long he started apparently before they have helmets, as anyone who has heard his speeches can attest. He later gets his comeuppance, as we can see in this clip.
I don't believe in karma. I guess I believe in odds. And statistically, people fall downstairs at some rate. And it might be that you are a person who someday falls down the stairs. And if you're a public figure, you might fall down the stairs when there is a camera on. And if you are a public figure who has criticized Joe Biden for falling, there is some chance you will be someone who, after criticizing Biden for falling, fall on camera yourself. And that's exactly what happened to Tommy Tuberville. He is a Republican senator. He went after Biden for falling. He mocked Biden. Salon Reports clip of Tommy Tuberville falling downstairs elicits reminders of all the times he mocked Biden. Known to crack jokes about Biden's various spills, Tuberville's own was quick to be called out. Here's the video arriving on a Miami Air. I guess this is some kind of charter jet. I don't know. Here's Tommy Tuberville. He's 69 years old. Remember, Biden's 80. Bringing his luggage down the stairs. The luggage does look too heavy. And then he just goes down. And the video is actually, he didn't get hurt, apparently. I don't like making fun of people getting hurt. He apparently didn't get hurt from what we know. the visual comedy element can't be ignored. And it's sort of almost cartoonish the way he goes down the stairs and is holding on to the railings. And it's visually, it's really something else. So listen, I don't believe in karma. I believe in odds. And if you're going to criticize someone else for falling, humans fall, and you might be the human who falls. This is not nearly as serious as Tommy Tuberville blocking military appointments for political reasons that cripple the United States because he disagrees with what most people believe about abortion. This is not nearly as serious as any of those things, but it is certainly an interesting thing to see.
But we've had football athletes, all Americans. I mean, if you look back, SNL made their bones doing Gerald Ford when he missed that one step. Gerald Ford was an elite All-American athlete, and the one time he falls, and some argue that's why he was not reelected, is that he was so characterized as being a buffoon from falling down the stairs that he didn't win a second term. And
I think it more had to do with the fact that he was a buffoon for pardoning Nixon, like that kind of buffoonery.
Everyone knew that was going to happen. I mean, that would have done more damage to the country. I mean, we're in that situation right now. What's going to happen with Trump if he's ever found guilty? How do you put a president in prison? Does that mean the security service goes to jail with him as well? I mean, it's like
whatever.
I don't think Trump is ever going to go to jail either. We're just not set up for that,
What Tuberville forgets is that Trump had trouble getting upstairs. Remember that evening. But again, two things can be true at the same time, as Gina's been saying. Tuberville is a big klutz.
Right. Well, it's not that he's a klutz; he's an idiot, and I know a lot of idiots.
No. Two things can be true, Tom.
What I'm saying is, I know a lot of idiots that can run up and down stairs. That's not a sign of intelligence.
No, he's a horrible person. He is.
I think we should really check my listeners before we go ahead and you just blanket everybody with the term idiot. I mean, some of us comedians rely on idiots for their fan base. Let's just be careful with that.
Or for their content.
And on that note, that's our show. I want to thank Jeff Hysen, Gina Brown, Chipp Jones, and Lucy Strausbaugh.
Thank you.
Thank you.
But before we go, my final thought. Will the issues we discussed tonight be resolved on this podcast? No. However, at the rate things are going, we stand the best chance of coming up with the best solution for the Middle East, better than any of this planet's top diplomatic negotiators. But will we be able to solve the issues going on right now? The answer is simply this. I don't know. Why the fuck are you asking me? I'm the host of a podcast that's able to operate solely because of Patreon contributions and the fact that this podcast also serves as a tax write-off. Stop asking me. One way to help bring about peace would be to hold a benefit concert in the region. Put all that hope for a desired outcome right where it belongs and where it's needed. And I have the perfect entertainment for it. No, not Bono, not U2, not even the very capable cast of the many Live Aid and Farm Aid concerts over the years. Personally, I think we should send Ted Nugent to perform. And Jason Aldean will be his opener. Think about it. Send them to perform in the Middle East. At least their fans will be armed. Will something as simple as that solve the crisis in the Middle East? Probably not. But one thing is for sure. Ted Nugent and Jason Aldean will be out of this country. And that, in my mind, is contentment. And even, albeit temporary, peace.
Yay.
Good night. This episode was written and hosted by Tom Myers with panelists Jeff Hysen, Gina Brown, and Chipp Jones, and guest Lucy Strausbaugh. Theme music composed and arranged by Jeroen Hurck. Executive producers Tom Myers, Matt Connarton for ipmNation, and Eddie Carson for Odyssey Radio. Please leave a 5-star rating and a positive review on Apple Podcasts. And don't forget to subscribe to our podcast's Patreon for ad-free episodes, early access to episodes, extended episodes, bonus clips, and more. Thank you for listening, and please visit tommyers.us.